Today we are going to learn about plot development. Plot development is the sequence of events that leads up to the resolution in a story. We can use a plot diagram to help us map out the major events of the story. Here is an example of what a plot diagram looks like. There are 5 main elements of plot development that should be included in a plot diagram. First is the introduction. The introduction is the beginning of the story and introduces the main characters and the setting. In most stories, the introduction includes the inciting event or the event that sparks the story's conflict. Next comes the rising action. The rising action is the events of a story that build up to the climax. At the top point of our plot diagram is the climax. The climax is the turning point of the story, and it is usually the most exciting and most anticipated event. The falling action includes the events of the plot that follow the climax and lead to the ending of the story. Finally comes the resolution or the conclusion. That is the ending of the story where all of the events are resolved. These 5 elements complete our diagram of plot development. Now let's apply it to the story of The Wizard of Oz.
We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
The Wizard of Oz begins with the introduction of Dorothy, our main character. The inciting event is the big cyclone that hits Dorothy's house and carries her to the land of Oz. Now let's think about the rising action that builds up to the climax. One event that we could put here is right after Dorothy lands in the land of Oz. This is when she is introduced to the Munchkins and witches, receives her ruby red slippers, and learns about how the Wizard of Oz can help her to get back home. Next, on her journey to the Emerald City, she meets the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion, and they all join her on her quest. We should also mention under the rising action that the Wicked Witch of the West, Dorothy's main enemy, makes many attempts to sabotage Dorothy and her friends because she wants Dorothy's ruby slippers. Since there are so many attempts, we can group it into one step. The next important event leading up to the conflict is when our gang arrives at the Emerald City and meets with the wizard for the first time. He gives them an assignment to bring back the broom of the Wicked Witch of the West before he will agree to grant their wishes. Our last main rising action in the story is when Dorothy throws water on the Wicked Witch of the West, which causes her to melt. This brings us to our climax. The climax, the most exciting event of the story, is when our great and mighty Wizard of Oz is revealed as an average human man. This is the turning point of the whole story. The falling action for the Wizard of Oz begins with the wizard granting the wishes to the 4 friends. The Scarecrow gets a brain, the Tin Man gets a heart, the Cowardly Lion gets courage, and Dorothy is promised a trip back home. The next falling action is when the wizard flies away alone in his hot air balloon, leaving Dorothy stuck in the land of Oz. Finally, the last event leading to the conclusion is when Glinda the Good Witch tells Dorothy to click her heels together 3 times, saying, "There's no place like home." Finally, the culmination of the whole story, or the resolution, is when Dorothy awakens from her dream back in her home in Kansas. Now you know how the events of a story can be organized by using a plot diagram.